According to a union representing workers at the Southern Poverty Law Center, or the Southern Impoverished Law Center, which more accurately describes them, the organization gutted its staff yesterday, laying off 60 workers and eliminating or drastically reducing multiple woke programs. Now, these layoffs came after the nonprofit watchdog group, Charity Watch, recently gave the SPLC an F for hoarding donations, saying it may not use a donation for more than 7 years due to the cash that it's hoarding. Now, the question is this in response to people waking up to the truth about the SPLC, or could the SPLC be purging their ranks of union members? Joining me now to discuss is Tyler O'Neill, who first reported this story. He is the managing editor of the Daily Signal and the author of the book Making Hate Pay: The Corruption of the Southern Poverty Law Center. Tyler, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I know few people that know more about the Southern Poverty Law Center than you. You've been tracking them for quite some time. You broke this story. Tell us what's going on.
Yeah, so the SPLC apparently told a whole bunch of its members that it was laying them off, a whole bunch of its workers, and it seems particularly to have targeted union members. The head of the union chair, realized that that person will be leaving his job. The 5 union leaders will also be losing their jobs, as well as a whole host of other union members. And Hannah Guy, who was one of the reporters with the SPLC, she posted on Twitter a very interesting statement saying this clearly isn't for lack of money. It's not like the SPLC is hurting for cash. So the real question is, are they cracking down on the union? And it's really weird that the SPLC has a union. They're a nonprofit organization where you would think people work there because they believe in the mission, not because they're out to make a buck. But apparently it was enough for them to unionize, and partially because the left is very focused on unions these days, apparently not focused on unions enough to work with the current union leadership. So this could be an effort to oust them.
Yeah, the SPLC has a union like people wear masks today. They don't need them, but it's virtue signaling to the left. And so that's what that's been my interpretation of the union at the SPLC for the last 2 years since they've had it. But let's go back to just a moment about the tweet that you made reference to, that this is not a shortage of cash. Again, you've reported on this. How much money is the SPLC sitting on?
So we don't know the current figures because they haven't filed their 990 yet. But for 2022, they had $731 million in their endowment. That's almost $750 million. So as Charity Watch noted, they could run their programs for 7 years without raising a single cent. And all that cash they get by demonizing mainstream conservative and Christian organizations like, I don't know, the Family Research Council, also Alliance Defending Freedom. And recently they put Gays Against Groomers, which is an openly gay organization, as the name suggests, on the hate map, putting them in the same designation as ADF and FRC as a quote unquote anti-LGBTQ plus hate group. So
how many left organizations have they identified as hate groups?
Yeah, I think there might be like 1 or 2. They do have the Nation of Islam, which is kind of on the left. But most of the time, there's pretty much none. I was reading through. So last week, they released their annual Year in Hate and Extremism report. And they had this thing where they condemned conservatives for twisting what they acknowledged was a legitimate issue, namely anti-Semitism on college campuses. But besides noting that it was a legitimate issue, the SPLC didn't say anything about it. Instead, they spent all their time suggesting that any criticism of George Soros is anti-Semitism, and saying that, oh, you can't, quote, you can't work with Moms for Liberty and you can't condemn anti-Semitism on college campuses because Moms for Liberty shared, one of their chapters quoted Hitler, don't you know? Well, yeah, if you look at why they quoted Hitler, it was about how the left is taking over our cultural institutions, which just puts the nail on the head that the SPLC is using its history to try to demonize and silence anyone who opposes woke orthodoxy, which has taken over our institutions.
So it's more than evident that they are not neutral on these issues. They are what I call the junkyard dog for the left. But the Biden administration is working closely with them.
Really closely with them. I mean, it's shocking to me. They've had their leadership and staff have, I believe, 18 meetings with the White House. The FBI notoriously cited them in that Richmond memo on radical traditional Catholic hate groups. But then they've also been having meetings with leadership at the DOJ and the Department of Education. And one of the stories that I broke earlier this year was that Margaret Wang, the president of the SPLC, bragged that many different agencies in the Biden White House reached out to them specifically for advice on combating the domestic terror threat, which is really terrifying considering that not only was one of their lawyers arrested for domestic terrorism last year, but their hate map inspired a domestic terror attack.
Right, on us.
12 years ago.
Yeah, on us. All right, Tyler, always great reporting and great to see you. We'll encourage people to take a look at your article. Thanks so much for joining us.